Welcome to the Untold Story podcast. I'm Martha McCallum, and joining me today is Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent for the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor. Byron and I have shared many shows and panels and desks and election nights over the years. And Byron, it's great to have you with us this morning.
Good to be here, Martha.
So, Byron, this news cycle is pretty incredible. And you have covered a lot of presidential cycles. I've covered 6. This feels unlike any moment that I can remember. And I was talking to actually someone who used to be high up at CBS News. And I asked them this question: when's the last time you remember things feeling this crazy? And I'll tell you what their answer was. But what's your answer?
Well, I was wondering when you were going to use the word crazy, because that's what it is. Well, I don't think that there's a few things that we've literally never seen. Now, historians can say, well, 1968 was just unbelievable in the sense that you had assassinations, you had the war, you had a sense of a lot of, I think, reasonable people thought maybe the wheel was just going to fly off the axle. So I'm not saying this is the worst thing that's ever happened. But this is first of all, we start out with something unprecedented, which is 2 presidents running against each other. And that hasn't happened in anybody's living memory. It happened in 1888. I'll leave it to Karl Rove to explain the history around this. But it hasn't happened in anybody's living memory. And then when you have a president who is clearly suffering cognitive difficulties that have been, in my opinion, clear for a long time. And I wrote a story in April 2019 headlined, "Face it, Joe Biden is too old to be president." This is obvious, but you have obviously his party with so much invested in holding the presidency, hiding this until this moment comes in which they can hide it no longer. And then, just like a herd, they all just run to the other side and think that at this very late date he has to be taken off the ticket. I mean, this kind of stuff is absolutely unprecedented, and that's not even mentioning Donald Trump and his indictments and trial and conviction and all that.
Absolutely. I mean, we were sitting on the set, and the night of the debate, Dana Perino and Harold Ford and me and Brett and Britt, and as soon as it started, right out of the gate, when he started answering questions, we just began looking at each other. What are we witnessing here? This is extraordinary. And I just heard Chris Coons, Senator Coons, who's one of the top advisors to his campaign, admit this morning that he was shocked when he watched what unfolded that night. And it has set about this amazing, I mean, if you were writing a play, a drama about politics, you really couldn't orchestrate it with more complexity than what is happening right now. And yesterday, when I saw that editorial from George Clooney, I thought to myself, is George Clooney the Walter Cronkite character in Lyndon Johnson's decision to step aside, which, by the way, is what was cited by this CBS friend as the last time things got this crazy? How do you see these power players moving right now in this extraordinary political drama?
Well, I think we saw, first of all, I think you have to look at the president's short-term survival and his long-term survival. And by short-term, I mean like this week. And right. Long-term, I mean beyond that. And actually, I think his strategy for short-term survival has been pretty brilliant, actually, and very effective, which is what you just described about watching the debate. Everybody felt that. And as you know, by 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on the time of the night of the debate, I mean, the Democratic Party was just crazed. He's got to go. He's got to go. And then some of the cooler heads started saying, well, look, wait a minute. If he had a bad night, that doesn't mean we change our candidate, et cetera. And they began to get a little traction, but still not a whole lot. And what turned things around in the short term for Biden was going to Philadelphia, going to a black church, talking about his African-American support, going to a union event, talking about his union support, and showing the Democratic Party He had the support of the Congressional Black Caucus. He had the support of Black religious figures. That he had the support of union leaders. And I think a lot of Democrats said, "Oh, okay, I guess he's going to be our candidate." And I think that bought him several days of tolerance in the party. The problem is, he's just one more cognitive event from being right back where he was.
Yes.
And we know his condition is not something that gets better. So I think it was his only play in the short term, but it's really hard to see how it works for him in the long term.
So in terms of some of these players, George Clooney wrote this piece for the New York Times this week, and here's what he said. "It's devastating to say it, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate." How do you think that landed at the White House when that editorial, the New York Times has been coming after Biden very hard in a number of ways with different editorials. How do you think that landed at the White House?
Well, in two ways. One, with a really big thud, like, we thought you were our friend. It's kind of, and they're having a lot of "we thought you were our friend" moments. On the other hand, Biden's deal right now, and you've been watching this, is that he is under attack from the elites of his party, and he is standing with the backbone of the Democratic Party, the African American voters, the union voters, middle class Joe. He's standing with them against these elites who are trying to push him out. And I have to say, almost every time Biden says that, some other elite like George Clooney, and you can't get more elite than that, pops up to kind of confirm what Biden is saying.
It's true. And what's so interesting from a big picture is that pretty much the same people who have been trying to tell conservatives and independents and Republicans that they just simply can't have Donald Trump at the top of their ticket, that it's going to destroy the country, right? Those same people are the ones who are now telling Joe Biden, "We don't care that you have almost all of the 4,000 Democrat delegates that you earned through people's votes in the primary system. We're going to push you out." It's fascinating to watch how hard they are trying to be in control of all of this, Byron.
I know, it was incredible. And I thought a thing that wasn't mentioned as much in the Clooney article was that he said, it pains me, it just breaks my heart to say that Joe Biden must go. But then we need to open it up and have an open competition among Democrats. And the first name he mentioned was Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. And then he mentioned Kamala Harris. And then he mentioned Governor Whitmer and Newsom and some other Democrats. And I thought to myself, he has put Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president of the United States, just on the level with everybody else. Yes. And that is going to play terribly among the African American voters and the union voters who are supporting Biden right now. I mean, this party has divisions. That was a really tone deaf thing for George Clooney or his writers or whoever to say. And it's not the way things are going to work out if Biden does actually step down.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
So I asked a Democratic donor, pretty high level Democratic donor, who has to be behind this? I mean, obviously Biden is dug in and he can make that argument. I've got all these delegates, but what would it take? And so what we're seeing now, there's reporting that, and it's something that I assumed was probably the case, that George Clooney doesn't write this without at least a tacit nod from Barack Obama, the former president of the United States. And these people don't start coming forward in this way to soften the waters. David Axelrod has always basically been mean about Joe Biden. I mean, the first time around, he called him Mr. Magoo wandering around the stage. That was in 2020. So these folks are being unleashed. What would it take a man-to-man talk with Obama to push him out? And how would that land? Because they have a complicated history.
Yeah, First of all, I don't think Obama can do it. I mean, when you're president, and Obama's not the president, and Biden is.
Right.
So Obama can't push him out. And I believe there are two possibilities. One, nobody can get Biden out of the race except perhaps his wife. Or two, if there is a person, I would put my money on Representative James Clyburn, because he is the one who saved the Biden presidency. Remember back to 2020, Biden was a disaster in Iowa, a disaster in New Hampshire. He goes to South Carolina, just a complete loser. And somehow, and for reasons that, to tell you the truth, I don't still understand, but Representative Clyburn picked him up and saved him and really created the Joe Biden victory in the South Carolina primary. And then it was just like dominoes falling. Everybody just stepped aside. Biden got the nomination. So I tell you, other than Joe Biden himself, if there is one person who is most responsible for the Biden presidency, I think it's Jim Clyburn. So if he goes to the president and says, you know, Joe, I love you, but it is time. There is literally no way you can remain in office. Maybe that would do it.
You know, the big question, I think it's a great point, and Clyburn, it would sort of be a bookend event for Clyburn and his relationship with Biden. One of the things that is ramping up, you know, James Comer, it looked like they ran out of steam on the Hunter Biden investigation. So now he's turning his focus over to who knew what and when about Joe Biden's condition. And even though the White House tells us over and over again, there is no condition. But they don't say what the reason is for why he freezes up and goes slack-jawed and sometimes looks like something is happening physically, but we still don't know what that is called or what it is. So who enabled Biden is the title of a piece that you wrote. Tell us what you learned writing that piece, Byron.
Well, that piece actually focused on one person, but I thought the story was kind of illustrative of a lot that has gone on. And it was Senator Patty Murray, the Democrat from Washington State. And if you remember, in early June, there was a story from the Wall Street Journal in the news pages about Biden losing a step, having cognitive difficulties, having good days and bad days. And it kind of confirmed what we had heard in the her report as well. And it was based on conversations with 45 people, according to the Journal, but most of the ones who actually went on the record were Republicans. Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, Mike Johnson, the current speaker, went on the record saying, you know, I was sitting there with the president and he seemed to like not remember this or that. So what happened was the White House engaged in furious pushback against the Journal, saying that the Journal news pages had enabled these partisan Republicans to make this partisan point against Joe Biden, and everything was really good. And Patty Murray came out, and she said, well, you know, I was in the meeting that was described in the article, and Joe Biden was just fine. And Patty Murray, I told the Wall Street Journal that, but they didn't include it in the article. I wonder why. Okay, so she engages in this effort to knock down this story, which is totally accurate. And now Senator Murray is like almost, she hasn't crossed the line, but she's walked right up to telling Joe Biden, like, get out of here. These are people who use their position and their influence, and in this case, her actual personal experience, having been in a meeting, to cover up this story. And then when it could no longer be covered up after the debate, boom, she's changed, direction 180.
So look into your crystal ball for me for a moment.
Very cloudy, very cloudy.
Really difficult, I know. Fast forward to the Democrat convention. Is Joe Biden still the nominee? Are there serious factions who are there at the convention trying to push him out?
Yeah, well, I think the second part is absolutely true. There will be, if he's still the nominee. My feeling is that depends entirely on his performance between now and then. And my guess is he's capable of sort of muddling through events in which his partisans can say, look, he's just fine. and his detractors can say he's got to go. So it may be that without kind of a cataclysmic event, and that split screen in the debate of Trump on the left, Biden on the right, Trump being completely in the moment, and Biden really zoning out. I mean, looking kind of, it was a concerning look, I think, for anybody who watched it, thought this guy is zoned out. That moment was so big and so intense. I don't think we're going to have another one of those until maybe there's a debate or something. So it's possible that Biden goes to the convention and he's the nominee, and he has to fight back a lot of rearguard actions, but he comes out the nominee.
Let me ask you in the last couple minutes about the Trump VP choice. And, right now there's some talk in the wind that the Burgum balloon seems to be losing a little bit of its air, and maybe Youngkin is in the mix. What are you hearing? What are you thinking as you watch this, Byron?
Funny, I was going to ask you what you're hearing. Well, it's interesting. I think Burgum and Youngkin are two very similar candidates in the sense that they're the businessman governor person. And I do think I've said a lot that rather than any geographic balance or racial or ethnic balance or any other balance, what Trump needs is temperament balance on his ticket. That is, like, that Trump is unpredictable, that Trump is Trump, and for a vice president, he needs a candidate who's kind of boring and steady. Mike Pence actually played that role for him in 2016, and I think either Burgum or Youngkin could play that role. I don't think as much air is out of the Burgum balloon as being reported right now. And there's one thing, I don't want to pay too much attention to trivial things, but Brett Baer said this the other night. It's true. Trump is a fairly tall guy, but Youngkin is really tall, right?
I know.
So Youngkin is 6'5". So the picture of the two of them standing together at the convention is Youngkin kind of towering over Trump. And I'm just having a hard time. I mean, Donald Trump is the most appearance-conscious president sort of ever. He was a TV star. He knows lighting. He knows angles. He knows how he wants things to look. And man, I just have a hard time with him and a vice presidential candidate who towers over him.
A couple of things on that. One is, so the question becomes like, well, how badly do you want Virginia, right? Are you willing to stand next to Glenn Youngkin in order to win Virginia potentially? And the other thing is, I can guarantee you that if he were to pick Youngkin, Byron would be not standing anywhere near the other side of Trump at that moment, because Byron and Youngkin are pretty much the same height. So he has to walk around from time to time with his son, which he seems to really be enjoying lately. It's really interesting to watch Byron kind of coming into his own as a member of the family and attending these political events. But it's always been interesting to me in the Trump world, like, being a celebrity or being central casting perfect is true currency. It's like a real factor in how they look at things. And
absolutely.
Yes. So we'll see, we'll see who he decides is like the best central casting vice president. I mean, it's not impossible for me to imagine a situation where Burgum or Youngkin gets themselves into a Pence sort of pickle as vice president if they're picked. They're both people who have very strong sense of character, and they don't strike me as guys who are going to be, over and over like, oh, I'm just going to let that go,
Well, I will say a couple of things. First, in praise of Mike Pence, Pence handled the vice presidency really brilliantly. And it was not easy given the way Trump can be. And obviously the break came literally on January 6th, where Pence did the right thing and, caught hell for it. But during the whole presidency, in which Trump did all sorts of Trumpy things that Trump can survive, but it's harder for anybody else to, I think Pence did that. Now, on Youngkin, one thing to remember, it is true, and you brought up Virginia. Virginia has not voted for a Republican for president in 20 years. Bush in 2004 was the last time. And if Trump, and now I think we had a Fox poll not too long ago that showed it absolutely even in Virginia. And if Trump were able to win Virginia, that really changes what he needs to do. I've been boring everybody with my electoral count, but basically what Trump needs to do to win is he needs to win all of his 2020 states, which he can do. Then he needs to win Arizona and Georgia. And if he does that, in my old computation, if he does that, he has to win one of Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin, and he's president. Just one of them. Yep. But if instead he wins Georgia and Arizona, and then he wins Virginia, he doesn't have to win any of Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin. So, you know, it's another way. Having Youngkin really might open up another path to an electoral college victory.
Maybe they could stand on steps next to each other to even it out a little bit. No, let me just say that I don't tire, Byron, of your electoral count configurations because, quick math isn't really my forte. So I love hearing your electoral count projections.
There's a website called 270 to Win.
Yes,
that
I know.
You can just become addicted to.
I know. I have. Believe me, I've spent a lot of down the rabbit holes on 270 to Win. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, very useful.
Byron, thank you very much. It's great to talk to you. As always, I hope you'll join us again as we move through this crazy electoral summer.
Always enjoy it, Martha. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Byron York of the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor, of course, one of our top best political minds, and we love to pick his brain. So great to have him with us. That is the Untold Story for today. I'm Martha McCallum.
You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.